Okay, so we got to know where America came from. Like, really, was it? I mean, yeah, America, the last great experiment. It really was. And now it is a new world order. Oh, absolutely. The old world was during the Middle Ages, before 1776, and in antiquity, before the Middle Ages. That's the cutoff with modernity and antiquity. Is modernity is the Renaissance period, the age of reason, math, science, all of that. I mean, and that also with the development of the religions, the endless religions, the cults, the Wiccan sects. When you think about how many Bibles and religious Wiccan sects could have been written ever since the Renaissance period, the age of logic and reason is subject to evolve. And even the Constitution is subject to evolve. And so the Rosicrucianism, and that's part of the Illuminati, right? They're saying that the Illuminati happened way back during the Crusades, or during the time of when Jesus was put on the cross or sacrificed and all that. Let's see, what year was the Crusades? The Crusades was back in 1095 and 1291. Yeah, I'm sure there were certain people that were trying to figure out how to, I don't know, position Christianity. I mean, I really can't speak to what happened back in the 1091 and 1295. That actually is just now going to be filtered through somebody else's intentions. Anything before, well, anything that was developed through a reasoning behind it, whether it was building up a framework for you to work with as far as a timeline, a construct, and biological viruses, okay, that make up the framework, the understanding of how to program people, and understanding disease and chronic illness. Even back in the days of antiquity, the Rosicrucians are about Egyptian hieroglyphics and what they used, what the pharaohs used, for the herbs and everything else that went on, that you see in the Bible, okay, like Genesis and Exodus and all that. And then Rosicrucianism, so it's like the Jewish mysticism, which is the Torah, and then the Kabbalah, and using all the magic and everything. And then you have the Christian Gnosticism, which is another sect of like Christian Science type of thing. And then you have all the Hermetics, and I haven't really studied the Hermetics too much. And then you have the Greek mythology, the Greek history. And so the Rosicrucianism, when you think, is a spiritual and cultural movement that arose in Europe in the early 17th century, after the publication of several texts purported to announce. Yeah. And so I'll tell you, a lot of things were developed during the Renaissance period. And even, of course, the reemergence of the Illuminati, the Freemasons, okay? Those that understood antiquity and knew how to use aspects of antiquity then to develop a new society. And so ever since, the Middle Ages, when, you had the what do you call it? The Reformation period and Martin Luther. That's when even more of the sciences, when you were saying something against the church, and then you were dubbed as a heretic or whatever, that's then where all the new thought processes that could be looked at as countering the church, but then finally the church merged with all of that, and that's why you have the Catholic Church and the science world merged together. That's why you have all the astronomers like Galileo and Newton and all the different chemists and astronomers, philosophers, Picasso and all that. And so then you have paganism. And so Rosicrucianism is a spiritual and cultural movement. And then, religion and Wiccan came from the age of reason. And so then you had all the herbology that came with that too. And you can watch all the movies of the Middle Ages. I mean, all the old texts that we have adopted as something like is what could be true in antiquity. There is no guarantee that whatever that was written on parchment actually happened in the way that it happened. Because stories, when you're looking at science, and science can be rather scary when you think about it. Just like when I'm showing those pictures of the teratomas and the cancers and the diseases that you can see manifest in someone's body, that's not exactly enticing to somebody. And how do you tell a story about that without turning somebody off and having them be afraid of the things that go on under the skin? Okay, so then you create a story around it. And that's where I think the whole Christianity came from. Because then you got to figure out, well, where did everything originate? Why were the Jews the chosen ones? And we came from obviously a very advanced race that edified us to a certain point, and then we had to go and pick up where they left off. And maybe we have been advised and instructed by an advanced race who knows who they are, where they are. They could be just regular humans that look like you and me, who are not immortal, but also, came from a different place. Where that place is, hell, I don't know. We can all speculate, Andromeda, wherever, Pleiades and all that, okay? But I'm going to say that you're kind of stuck here. Or your spirit's going to be roaming around looking for a body to inhabit. But either way, we were edified and taught by someone or something. Well, could we have just evolved? Like, how my information evolved ever since I started the Jilly Juice, and I evolved myself. I came to terms with some, aggressive energies and dealt with it and faced them face to face, and then new discoveries. Well, all my new discoveries came from things that were already put out there. All the connections I've been making were stuff that was already put out there through science and through math, science, social studies, English, and whatever. And so I'm working off of somebody else's information, but put it together in a different way. And so you couldn't just develop math out of nowhere. It came from somewhere. The whole number line, the whole reasoning, okay? There was probably a race of giants at one point, and then the race of giants then were dwindled down and bioengineered back down to a manageable level, like someone who's like 6 foot or 7 foot or 8 foot or 5 foot. And so there have been several simulations and civilizations, the rise and fall of simulations and civilizations. And yeah, viruses were part of it. The plague, same thing, pestilence, and then war and all that stuff then caused the rise and fall and the conversions of one society into another. And the religious wars and all the religions, when you think about the people that were given the advancements, like the different viruses that give them the intellect so they can focus on certain things and they can start putting things together and then innovate and invent some amazing inventions. And then they were being worshipped as a god, or they were able to put together language and sound and frequency and use numbers and codes and all of that, which then gave them another way to look at the world that we live in. And then that also translated into another religion or another way of saying and doing things. And so then people then became followers of those that were inventing new languages, new religions, new innovation. And then you have Hollywood that is emulating things like that happen in antiquity. Because you look at, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jason Momoa and all the Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus and Britney Spears, and they were just as, the people that were revered as gods back then, and it could have been Jesus too, were just as exploited back then by those that understood how to exploit humans as the Hollywood stars are exploited today and cannibalized and consumed by the masses. And then turned into followers to then convert their energy into currency. And then when people are not useful, this say you later, bye-bye. Okay, you're gone. It's palliative care and hospice. And so it's hard to say how much of what we have read, okay, of antiquity actually happened in the way that it's written, or it was an allegory explaining science. And that's the thing with the Bible. We think of all the 10 plagues. There is a scientific, logical explanation behind all the 10 plagues of Egypt. But it's fun to say, oh, there's a powerful being in the sky called God is then, okay, now I'm going to create blood in the water and frogs and the death of the firstborn and all the 10 plagues of Egypt. And it's more fun to scare people into saying, if you don't follow this way of doing stuff, then you will have pestilence and blood in the water and all these things will happen. Just like saying, someone going to hell. If you don't do this, this, and this, you're going to go to hell. Well, you're already in hell, honey. Now you just got to survive hell. Yeah, it's hot right now. We're in hell, and all the viruses that are heating up the planet, we are in some kind of apocalyptic hell as we speak. The global warming, all the things that we were taught. But I'll tell you that America came from the Middle Ages. Well, obviously, just by where it is on the timeline, 1776, and then the Rosicrucians developed in the 17th century. They're not that far apart from each other, and there were definitely an association of minds that strategized the development of America and knew how to manipulate the ignorant masses and knew how to figure out how to tap into their culture, into their desires, their wants. They knew alchemy, they knew viruses, they knew herbs, they were studying the human condition, studying everything. They were doing all the different medieval medicines and torturing people, seeing how far they can take them as far as pain. I mean, we see some pretty horrific stuff if you look at pictures of historical timeline stuff. And so we don't want to go down that same road again, but we do it in a lab with animals, okay? Which is why PETA exists. And so paganism today grew from the new outlooks of the Renaissance period. Okay, paganism came out of the Renaissance period, 1500, and the Reformation of the 1600s through the revival of druidry and all the other paganistic stuff. And that's where you get all the Beltane, and that's where you get all the satanic stuff that the born-again Christians are like, oh my God. And that's also part of the whole thing of the Illuminati, the Freemasons. They are a conglomeration of Jewish mysticism, Christian Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and Greek mythology, Greek history. They are an association of different separate entities that have converged together and figured out how to integrate the diverse society, but also keep them separate if people didn't want to associate with something that they thought was different. And so that's why it's weird, like the Freemasons can also be Judeo and Christian, and they can also be satanic. Okay, whatever, that's its own religion, about that guy, I forget his name, Alex Crowley or whatever, or what's his name, Crowley. And so you have so many offshoots of the originals, and then you have so many offshoots of the religions. Some religions that like the Mormons, very new, Jehovah's Witnesses, pretty new. And then you see, when you read about the Fritz Springmeier's Illuminati bloodlines, and you hear about them developing certain religions, yeah, I think it came out of the Rosicrucian. It came out of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance period, which then they took antiquity and had to formulate some kind of history. How much of it's true, you don't know. But then that's the simulation that when you believe something has happened from this point to this point, and then you have to have stories and things then align with that. That's how you develop an organized society that's all under the same page. Whether or not it actually happened doesn't matter. As long as you believe it happened and then everything else kind of aligns with it, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant if it actually happened. Because if you weren't there, then what's the point? What are you trying to prove? And so then you realize, and if you question history, then you can develop a new history. History happens every day. Right now is history. Because we just said something right now, and now it's the past. And then you can go and re-record, and you can go re-listen to what you said. And that happened 15 seconds ago. So the past could be like 15 seconds ago, or it can be 15,000 years ago, I guess, if you want to calculate it through the suns and moons and the stars. And so, anything past the 5,000 year mark, it's hard to quantify 60 million years ago and the dinosaurs and all that. So that's when things get kind of weird, into the hominids and all of that evolution, splicing and dicing, viruses and DNA and biodiversity. So some major developments of the Renaissance include, include developments in astronomy, humanist, philosophy, the printing press, vernacular language, and writing. Oh yeah, different slang. You know, you could say like certain sects, certain cultures have their own vernacular. You know, dialects. Okay, painting and sculpture, writing, sculpture technique, world exploration, and then you have the Shakespearean. That's the storytelling. That's also part of the archetypes. And you can see in Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, and then that's how they program society to then people take on the archetypes and the characters. And they want to live like Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet and the Taming of the Shrew and all the Shakespearean stories, okay? And so further, the Renaissance led to the creation of humanism and gave a stimulus to the growth of vernacular literature. As a result, the Italian, French, German, Spanish, and English language blossomed at that time. The Protestant Reformation movement was also strengthened by the Renaissance period. So the Protestants, the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxons. The WASPs are huge in suburbia. When you're in a WASPy community, it's usually a higher upper middle class, like in the middle of Silicon Valley, and they have their country clubs and their exclusivity, and it's hard for them to integrate with anyone other than their WASPy community. And so that came out of Europe, okay? And so the most significant change that emerged as a result of the Renaissance can be seen in European architecture, art, literature, mathematics, music, philosophy, politics, religion, and science. And then you see the development of then the witch sects, and then academia was on top of that. And I remember when I was listening to videos, I started listening to videos of just classes because I wanted to increase my knowledge. So I'm like listening to Stanford University classes on modernity. That's where I learned the word modernity, was I was listening to a Stanford professor. Because I'm like thinking, like, okay, the smartest school is, do they have any classes online that I can listen to, that I can see if I can sponge up some information? And yeah, I was Googling Stanford University classes in antiquity and modernity, and I didn't really understand everything they were talking about. And maybe there were certain things I'm like I was trying to understand something that I had no idea what I was listening to. But the one thing that stuck, if I don't remember what the class it was that I was listening to back in 2011, was modernity. And then when you Google modernity and you see the cutoff between modernity and antiquity, then you realize everything that we know today came from the Renaissance period. And then all the stuff from antiquity, well, yeah, you could see the pictures of the things they dug up in excavation sites and archaeological digs. And you can make stories about them, any story you want. You can say it's 20,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago. Then you can go and do measure to strat and be like, okay, there's a volcano here and there's something happened here. But then after anything past like 5,000 or 6,000, even then, it's hard to quantify even 1,000 years. Right now, we can quantify about 300 or 400 years from the middle century, from the Middle Ages. Okay, mid-century, Middle Ages, because that's where we have the Albert Einsteins. He didn't come from the middle; he came from the 1930s. He came out of World War II. Okay. He rose up around the 1930s, 1940s. Well, what happened before that? Then you had the Civil War. But before that was like when America was born, 1776. Then you had 100 years later, you had the Civil War. We are very young when you think about it. Europe is obviously way older than us. And a lot of the innovation and the astronomers and the chemistry came out of Europe and came out of the Renaissance period. And yes, using herbs and causing fertility, programming people, and then you had your class society, your classism. You had your poor people, the steerage, and you had the upper class that you see in the Titanic, that movie Titanic. And so those that were lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon in their mouth, they had a lot of opportunities, and also were the movers and shakers and the Freemasons, the leaders. And then they figured out how to edify an ignorant population. Well, you go to school. We'll teach you certain aspects of history, but not everything. Because everything that the knowledge of antiquity was left for the higher level Masons, or those that went into these colleges that were probably doing experiments. And I'm sure I was raised in a household where they were privy to then the rollout of some kind of long-range plan. And so they were privy to a certain aspect of it. Were they privy to the whole thing? No. Or they'd be like, holy crap. Or my mom would be like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, Jillian. But no, she couldn't hear what I had to say, because remember, college graduates, even with their advanced degrees, are very compartmentalized in the very specific tunneled area that they were taught in. And then they were taught to do their job relative to the expectation of the society at the time. And then they die with that knowledge. But then that knowledge then does evolve eventually from other generations that are able to then finally were able to contribute. Well, I was that offspring of then taking what she knew and what she understood and what I was raised with and evolve it, even if it countered her traditions. Okay, and that's what America is about taking platforms of information that will be fine for a certain amount of time, but it must evolve. But every revolution is, a revolution going in circles, but it's also an evolution. It's also a period of innovation, and then new things get birthed from that. Even though some people are going in loops and circles and always resisting the system and whatever, then there's another side of society that's also evolving. But you need the revolutionaries to then help us get to another level, while those that are taking that energy are then evolving and strategizing and developing new innovation. And so both the plus and the minus have to work together yet again. You can't take away the minus to have the plus. They both have to exist. Now you just have to survive it and not end up to be the negative. But you want to be so positive that you're causing cancer. And so again, there is that balance. And so then you have to figure out that America was the last great experiment. That's why the Constitution is a living document. It's going to change, and there's going to be many changes coming forthwith in this society, and you got to be ready for it. And don't look at it as someone trying to stomp on your freedoms. You still have to protect yourself. Be very careful of your surroundings and who you entertain, and who you talk to, and why, and who you listen to, and why. And you still have to figure out how to evolve in this changing climate, because it's going to change and it's going to be extraordinary. And listen to indicators, watch the news, watch the weather, and try not to get caught up in the war, because you have your own war brewing inside. Some people haven't discovered that yet, and they're still projecting out there. But when they really do have a war inside, they're going to try to squelch it with chemotherapy, radiation, herbs, extracts, and being under the influence of alcohol, drugs, and something else. But they're still going to then project another war out there. Okay? And then you just got to stay out of the melee and don't get caught in the crossfire, and then observe the people around you. And it will confirm everything that I'm saying here. And so we are in a period of renaissance at this point. Okay? But just know that America was never meant to be the way it was forever. It was meant to evolve. Just when and how it was going to be done, now we know. It's happening right now. But America was never supposed to be what it has been. It was supposed to evolve. We just didn't know it. All right. Bye.